Hello everybody, Blue Dooley, and I forgot to record my intro for today's video. In today's video, we're going to be rebuilding my turbocharger on the pickup truck, as I've been losing oil, but it's not leaving puddles. So I was kind of assuming, kind of a mistake, but usually that would mean that one of the seals in the turbocharger is going bad. And usually, you can easily tell if the turbocharger is leaking is because you're either blowing oil out your exhaust or you're starting to fill your intake full of oil. And on a diesel, if they're bad enough or you get enough oil in the intake, you can actually get a runaway. So the rebuild kits are not terribly unreasonable. The one I got was $100. They range in about 100 to 150, kind of depending on where you are or where you look to order them from. They do not come with instructions, but the turbocharger itself is fairly easy to take apart and reassemble. In fact, it took me longer probably to find the torque specs to torque the compressor wheel nut back to the shaft than it did to actually rebuild the turbo if I was not filming. We got a little high speed going, taking the turbocharger off of the truck, and took me a little bit because I kind of forgot what size wrenches I need, and I apparently got a few of them really tight. There's also not a lot of room to get your big old mitts in there to get the turbo out. But now we'll take a look at the turbo. Got the turbocharger pulled off the truck, and I had expected to see a little more oil in it. We'll try to get you in there so you can see. It's not a big leak, but it is starting to get a little oil in the intake. And we'll flip it over here. Well, not flip it over, I'll just... And it's pitch black in there, but does not appear to be any oil coming out the back end of the turbo. So we'll pull it apart, and I got a seal kit for it, so we're just going to go ahead and rebuild it. New bearings, seals, and then I just don't have to worry about it. The exhaust doesn't show anything weird, so we'll go ahead and get the hoses off, or the hose off for the wastegate, get the compressor side pulled apart, and then we'll get the turbine housing pulled off and see what it looks like from there. We'll jump in with some more high speed, and I have the turbocharger sitting on a old towel just since I have a metal workbench. I figured that would keep me from scratching the turbocharger up and just give a nice padding to set all those parts on, because while they're not fragile, you kind of don't want to be banging them around either. A set of standard metric wrenches and some standard metric sockets, really all you need to take the turbocharger apart. The only issue I had was once I started taking the bearings apart, we'll get to a little later, to actually take the bearings out. You do need snap ring pliers, and the ones for the bearings have a very small opening, so your snap ring pliers need to be a fairly small set with fairly small tips just to get those smaller snap rings undone. There is oil on the bottom side here. That, and it doesn't look like the drain tube was where it was leaking at, so I think that seal's just starting to go. And that actually looks like tool marks. But I don't see see anything other than those. There's no end play, so I guess we'll pop that other side off and come back. Got the turbo separated apart now. And again, we're looking black on black in shadow, but there's no obvious scrapes or mars inside the turbo. I pulled the wastegate off just so I can throw some high temp paint on this. Since we got it apart, might as well make it look pretty. But I did have to give it a little tap to get this to come apart, because of course it is a little rusty. But yeah, I can't see anything. The scrapes here were probably just from me taking apart. So now I guess I need to find something to hold this so I can take the nut off, and then we can get further into the turbo. I wiped out the turbo, or the compressor side, and definitely an oily film in there for sure. So while it might not have been leaking badly, it's probably been leaking for a little bit. So I just wiped it off for now. I'll take it over the trash can and give it a better rinse out and clean it up a little more. And I did a quick wipe down with some brake clean on that side of the wheel, and definitely a film on the turbo. So I think this was a good time probably to take it apart, get it cleaned, and put new seals and bearings in it, because while it isn't leaking bad, it is starting to leak a little bit. So I think we might have got a little lucky on this one. Hopefully we'll focus, but this is a reverse thread, so it's righty loose instead of lefty loose. And it was pretty snug. A little bit of oil on that still. You'll need, of course, snap ring pliers. But I don't see any. A little bit of pitting, but I don't feel any like scrapes or anything concerning. So that's good. So I wonder if we have to take this side off and then it'll pull out. Woo! Well, that's in there really snug. Let me get my other set. I don't want to pry too bad. That didn't actually take much prying at all, so. Well, rather anticlimactically, I saw this little ring on here, and I thought that whole thing had to come apart, but apparently it doesn't. So I managed to pop this off the shaft, And then I just held it off the bench a little bit and just very, very, very lightly tapped that, and it just plopped right out. So now we can get a look at that, and there's another snap ring in there. So then we got to figure out, hopefully the bearings come out pretty easily. But we'll get to what's in the kit here in a little bit. I mean, overall, nothing looks terrible. It's just kind of, sort of starting to go. So here is the rebuild kit. They run anywhere from 100 to 150 bucks, depending on where you get them. The big difference is the new one has a 360-degree bearing, and the old one had a notch cut out of it, so this piece could slip in. But on this one, it's actually going to use kind of a two-piece, and I'm not sure what exactly all that gains. I guess it does keep everything a little more interference fit, so stuff can't move quite as much. But it comes with 4 new small snap rings, so you do need to make sure you keep a hold of your big snap ring. Comes with this new seal. This big seal, my turbo didn't have that, but I think it actually goes around the compressor. It kind of seals right here, but mine did not have an O-ring there, so that is just a guess. This kit does cover a lot of different turbos. Has a couple of new split rings, and of course it does have new bearings. These do have holes in them, and there are holes in here. I don't know if we'll get you in anywhere good enough to see them or not. So I think there's just enough clearance that the oil comes out, flows around this, and then goes in all the holes to lubricate the shaft. It has a new one of these plates, which I'm not exactly sure what we're calling that, but it covers it up like that. And I guess just kind of helps the oil get down the drain instead of sitting at the bottom of the housing. Also, a new nut to put on at the end of your compressor wheel. So I'm going to, actually, I also should say, I have a couple pairs of snap ring pliers, and the smaller snap rings, mine wouldn't get a hold of, so I actually took this one over to the belt sander and kind of narrowed those tips a little bit so they would actually go in these smaller snap rings. So that just might be something you have to do. Depends on how thick your snap ring plier ends are, or if you have changeable ones. If you have a smaller set, you'll probably need to change those out. But I'm going to fish the last 2 snap rings out of there, hopefully, because again, these are pretty thick and that's not a very big opening. So we're going to start slowly putting it back together. So this snap ring was an absolute pain in the ass to get off of this shaft here. The new one went on pretty smooth, so that old one, that's a finger pinching son of a bitch right there. So I'm gonna clean the shaft up, and I'm gonna throw some assembly grease on it. That way I'll be sure it does not spin up dry when I start the truck up later today. I'm not 100% sure if that is necessary or not. I saw mixed opinions of it. Some people just said oil it with the oil. But I have the assembly lube, and I will probably feed a little oil through it after I get it bolted to the truck. So now We'll get that slipped into here. I didn't film this in time lapse, and the video file is 8 minutes 31 seconds. I really didn't feel like making you sit through all 8 minutes of me putting the turbocharger back together, so I'm currently working in the video at 3 times speed. And at some point I get it most of the way together and then realize I forget a part. So it actually probably would have taken only 4 minutes if I wasn't filming and talking and not really paying attention while putting the turbocharger back together. So it pretty much does go back together very easily. I didn't see anybody recommending to put a little bit of lube on the O-rings when you slide that one part in. But all the pieces fit together really well. There was no play in any of them when the turbo was finally assembled. I mean, there was no up, down, or in, out movement. So, pretty happy with the kit I got. I don't have a link to it because I just kind of tried to find one I could get in the shortest amount of time. So you might be able to find a little better deal, or if you're not in a big hurry because you have something else you can drive while you wait for parts, then you could maybe find a little better deal, or just have it take a little cheaper shipping route. But again, I really didn't struggle getting the turbocharger back together. Just a good firm shove seated that shaft back in there with that snap ring by the exhaust side wheel, and then kind of had a little bit of trouble getting that big C-clip or snap ring put back in, as well. It a little bit of a struggle, but not too terribly bad. Again, the turbo did go back together really well, and that big seal, I tried to put it where I thought it went earlier in the video. It just didn't. I need to look up the torque spec on that, and then we'll come back. So after a little searching online, it's 15 foot-pounds or 180 inch-pounds, which is about not quite 15. So I'm going to go to 15 foot-pounds, and because this is a beam style torque wrench, it'll torque either direction, which is handy since this torques left ways instead of right ways. So I'm going to get that torqued, and then we're going to clean that up, and I think we're going to paint that, because why the hell not? So I decided while waiting for paint to dry, and while I was finishing reassembling the center section of the turbo, I got the exhaust side bolted back up on the truck, and this way, since you can infinitely clock all 3 pieces of the turbo, and to get the drain line hooked up, I figured I'd just put this on the manifold, then I can jam the drain tube in there, stick it in there, and have it clocked exactly where it needs to be. We do have a new oil filter, so that'll be getting changed out here pretty quick. And I threw some paint on the exhaust manifold just to kind of tidy it up a little bit. It's never going to be a show truck, but it'd kind of be nice to keep it a little nicer, I suppose. So I got the back plate for holding the turbine housing, or the center section, to the exhaust housing in. I just got those real loose. That way I don't have to try to fight and start with them. So now I'll feed the drain tube into there. And then we'll get an oil filter on, and then maybe paint will be dry. Let me get the turbo. And it doesn't look like you can actually do that way. Maybe we'll take the top bolt out. Maybe it'll swing out of the way enough. Nope. Of course. That'd be too easy. That one's very hard to get to with big fat fingers. Come out. There we go. Okay. Now, probably have to take gloves off to get those fingers on. Alright, that one's on. Better take my keys off or I'm going to scratch my fender all to hell. Okay. So I don't know if you can see where we're trying to blind feed this in or not, but that's going to be a pain in the ass. So I think I'm going to turn the camera off and get that in there. Alright, got the turbo in, the lines hooked back up, new oil filter. These little guys on the back side, that very bottom one way in the back, that's a son of a bitch to get to. And I was delayed because I had to get 2 new nuts for both of these band clamps because, well, they couldn't go super easy. But that is going to do it for this one, so I'm going to put the air filter back on, clean up, and go eat some dinner. So we'll catch you in the next one.